And we are live. Great. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Love First Christians. This is our first current events session. There was some hunger for it among everybody who had responded, been part of our Bible studies and our topic studies. We're still going to keep doing this, but there was a desire to do, sorry, I'm just getting some feedback here. Let me close this. Okay, here we go. But yeah, there was a desire to do this among the participants there, and I totally get it. Current events is a big deal, and obviously we want practical Christian applications for the things that people are thinking about and things that people are experiencing. Christianity is much more than just some ideology, some philosophy. It's practical. There are things that you're supposed to do with it. And so when we talk about our faith, and I'm here with Bryce. How you doing, Bryce?
I'm doing good. Been a little bit since I've been on one of your streams, but I'm happy to finally have some time and sit down and partake again.
Good. Happy to have you. I know you've been busy. You're even tired right now. So if we get Bryce sleeping during the stream, that'll just be a treat for us.
No, we'll avoid that.
So,
we don't need another.
Right. Well,
one of those streams.
You know what? It'll help anybody else who's watching and trying to find something to fall asleep to. They'll have something to listen to with me, and then they can fall asleep with you. And we're here to meet everybody's needs. And let's be honest, sleep is probably one of many people's needs right now. Bryce, we're going to talk about the 2024 U.S. election here. It's going through a lot of people's minds. Obviously, it wrapped up earlier this month. Doesn't take effect until early next year, but it's happening. Donald Trump was voted to be our next president, defeated Kamala Harris. He is the second president who will serve non-consecutive terms, the first being Grover Cleveland. So it's kind of an interesting event. He won, he lost, he won.
There's actually some similar parallels between the two as well, at least in terms of like how they ended up losing their like middle election and then what propelled them to get jump back into the White House. Grover Cleveland happens to be the one that I think is probably in a very grading on the curve, by the way, that most presidents have been awful. Grover Cleveland is actually probably the one that I would consider the best we've ever had.
Best ever.
Yes. I would give Grover Cleveland that honor.
You and I are both in the liberty movement. Most people would give that distinction to Calvin Coolidge, but I appreciate you thinking outside the box with Grover Cleveland.
I could understand why someone would potentially throw that to Coolidge. I would say that Cleveland actually succeeded in keeping us out of economic crises entirely, whereas Coolidge kind of just navigated one, but
yeah,
that's
yeah. So I wanted to talk about this specifically through a Christian lens, because I think everybody's heard analysis forever on this. It's and I understand it's fascinating to people. I mean, we're already getting some views rolling in here, and I understand why. It is an interesting situation. It is going to impact a lot of people's lives. Ultimately, who wins the presidency matters to a lot of different people. Mike says he would join. So, Mike, have fun with your lawyer. I totally get it. When we talk about elections and voting, we're talking about something political. And it's important to me, not only that I find Christianity to be apolitical, but that I find that I want my particular group to also be apolitical. I want to be welcoming of people who voted for Trump, voted for Harris, voted for Oliver, voted for Stein, voted for Vermin Supreme. Whoever it is that your heart felt like voting for is what you should do. The Holy Spirit should guide that decision, not a human being. And if you vote a way that I don't like, to me, that's not a sign that you need to vote differently. To me, that's a sign that your faith needs to change. Something needs to change. Your relationship with God needs to change. You become closer, and then we'll see the effects in the ballot box. Even then, it's a little misleading because my goal isn't to change your vote. My goal is to get you right with God. The ballot box is just one way that we kind of determine where people's hearts are at. So I find that as Christians, we can learn a lot from this election about where people's hearts are at, and what we can do for them from there. So Bryce, any initial thoughts you have as a Christian? What are kind of some of your thoughts that go about with the 2024 election? You can even just start with one of them and we can discuss it because we got a lot of time here.
I mean, the unfortunate reality of this election cycle is, from a Christian perspective, we're about to witness a lot of very unnecessary and tragic loss of life, particularly over in Gaza with what's going on with Israel and Palestine. It wasn't going to matter who got elected between Harris or Trump. That was going to be an inevitability. I guess I am a little hopeful that maybe with a Trump administration, I didn't vote for him. I'm not going to pretend I support him. I am hoping that maybe the suffering in Ukraine will come to an end. But beyond that, I mean, neither of these options are going to be very, very good or even remotely aligned with Christian values. It was just going to be two very, very bad options from a religious standpoint.
Yeah, and that's something about politics. I think we need to embrace that the mainstream politicians are not reflective of Christian values. And listen, these people are voted for by people. So we have kind of left Christianity behind in exchange for various things. And if you look at the Republicans and Democrats, I would say it's two different kinds of idols that we're looking at. And I don't want to put anybody above it. Of course, I'm a longtime libertarian and anarchist. The libertarians this cycle sold out for Trump. And I'm admitting my biases, but I want to make sure I understand why people voted for who they voted for. We're all in a place of harm reduction. I don't think you're a bad person if you vote for Harris or Trump because you're just you feel that you're doing as little harm as you can. You're trying to do what you can to minimize that. I get it. Everybody thinks, they voted for the lesser evil. And that's kind of what we're going at here. You brought up war, so let's just start with that one. Trump campaigned on kind of ending wars. He ran a commercial talking about it. He did say that day one, not just on his inauguration, but actually day one after his election, that the war in Ukraine would come to an end. That has not come to fruition, unfortunately. In fact, that has amplified dramatically within the last month here. But even so,
I will say that part of that is kind of Biden's fault, giving Ukraine full permission to just start launching U.S. air missiles into Russia. And
sure,
but yes, it has not ended yet.
Yeah, so Trump broke a promise. That's not going to surprise anybody here, right? Like you got between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Trump notoriously, just empirically, is the worst liar in the history of American politics, just by volume, by rate. Kamala Harris is not far behind him. Joe Biden's not far behind that. We are getting less and less honest with our politicians. And frankly, what that to me indicates is that as Christians, we're not holding people to kind of an honesty standard, right? Like we allow people to get away with lies. I think when I see it on the left, I see a lot of poor fact checking. I see the left wing media lie a lot. And let's be honest, a lot of the mainstream media is left wing, right? Like NBC, CNN. When I look at my ground news and I look at between like what the left wingers are looking at, what the right wingers are looking at, and the disparity between those two. What I see is I do see misinformation there. The right wing has misinformation as well, but it's more fringe, right? And it's not that people believe it, it's that there is a cultural acceptance of it. So like even JD Vance like didn't believe that the cat, the eating animals story, right?
No.
He himself was like, sometimes I need to spin a tale to save America, like he said. So the right wing kind of accepts lying as part of the business that we got to do. That this is what we need to do. The left wing has accepted lying as just kind of, well, we want our person elected. And sometimes, you got to embrace a little bit of evil in order to do that, a few lies in order to do that. We wanted to talk about war, and I'm talking about honesty, but I guess that's just because it matters to this particular subject and as far as what somebody's actually going to do and what they can do. That Trump promised that they would end, upon his election. It did not. Bryce, I guess to finish this point, just for any of our viewers who are unaware, Joe Biden did enable Ukraine to launch long-range missiles into Russia. So instead of playing a battle of defense, they're now playing a battle of offense. The idea seems to be, and we don't know for sure, but what appears to be at the moment is that if there is a negotiation after Trump takes office, that they will have a portion of Russia, whereas Russia has a portion of Ukraine. And then what they'll do is just say, hey, let's leave each other's sides, and then Trump can negotiate that. That's an idea. It would be interesting. Trump negotiated the withdrawal from Afghanistan and Biden executed on it. So it'd be interesting to see the vice versa, to have Biden negotiate a withdrawal from war and have Trump execute on it. Any thoughts about like the Ukraine war for now, Bryce?
I mean, the unfortunate, it's not going to be a 1-to-1 comparison because it doesn't seem like Biden has any interest in actually negotiating a withdrawal from that war. So it's going to be more like Trump's administration is going to be expected to, which we'll see how that goes. Both de-escalate and negotiate simultaneously upon entering the White House and then having to execute it afterwards. We'll see how it goes. Trump did say something, which again, it is, you got to take it for what it is. There's probably an element of lie to it, but Trump did say something immediately afterwards about how he still plans to negotiate and basically, hey, don't do anything super irrational because what people seem to forget with Russia specifically is they are one of the larger nuclear powers in the world, and Putin is, like most world leaders, a sociopath, and launching missiles into his country could potentially be grounds for him escalating the situation further. So there is an attempt on Trump's part to try and be like, hey, let's not do that because we're going to negotiate an end to this. We'll see how that plays out. I think regardless of who's executing it, as long as this war results in not having nuclear destruction of the entire earth, I will take that as a win. If ideally without more civilian death as well, great. But it will be interesting to see how that plays out for sure.
Alex, welcome. We're kind of talking about specifically the war in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia right now, and kind of that what that means from like a Christian perspective. Any thoughts you have on that?
I have to kind of echo his sentiment just because I don't like obviously most people don't want Russia to win, but like at the same time, everyone's worried about the nuclear weapons. I mean, Biden just announced that he's giving more missiles to Ukraine with the intention of them hitting Russia directly if needed. And that's a little worrisome. Like, I'm all for Ukraine defending itself, and if people want to go over there and fight out of free will, so be it. You can't stop an individual, but I'm not comfortable with the idea that they go on the offensive and go into Russia and start attacking and killing Russian civilians and even lobbing missiles at Russia directly and running that risk, kind of like Iran and Israel hitting each other with missiles.
Yeah. I mean, to wrap this up, we've talked a lot about information here. But the Christian perspective is we can't be killing innocent people. We want to prevent these deaths. We also believe that people deserve a right to live free. And this means Russia needs to go home. Ukraine has every right to defend itself from their aggression. The US and Russia actually signed an agreement to denuclearize Ukraine, and in exchange we took their nukes from them, and in exchange we would both participate in their defense. And at the same time, as Christians, we're also called to honor our agreements, honor our arrangements, honor our contracts. This is something that's been kind of there from the Old Testament. This is complicated. I don't want anyone thinking it's not. And if you kind of just say, I'm going to pray for our leaders, this is one of those situations where you just kind of say, I'm going to pray for our leaders. As you'll find when we discuss current events, none of this is clear cut. None of this is easy. We wouldn't be having these discussions if it was. Like it's why we haven't had a topic study about murder, right? Like murder, don't do it, right? Like it's just bad. But conversely, like there is so many, if we just pull out of Ukraine entirely, Russia just blows them up and takes them over. That's obviously wrong. At the same time, if we back them, take money from the taxpayers, give it to Ukraine, then Ukrainians start blowing up Russians, then that's wrong too. And we need to find some way. This is the dirty business of politics. This is a tough first episode to have about current events because it's messy. There's no clean way to do this. Personally, I think the only clean way to do it is to end our contractual relationship, give them back their nuclear bombs. Russia would leave very quickly. And then, we just kind of say, hey, I'm sorry, we're not going to defend you anymore. What do you do?
Well,
who can you say?
Yeah. I completely agree with that, Hody. I'll say though, it's actually more egregious than you're even making it sound, because it's not like we're taking taxpayer money and just giving it to Ukraine. We're in a very convoluted roundabout way taking taxpayer money and redistributing that wealth to the major military contractors in the United States. It's the same thing we're doing with Israel, where we're giving that country the money so that they can then spend it on our big military contractors. So then they can go bomb, Russia, or in the case of Israel, Palestine. So it's actually even more egregious.
Yeah, let's flip over to Israel and Palestine. That's the other war. There was more innocent civilians dead in the first month after the October 7th terrorist attacks from Hamas against Israeli, but not even just Israeli citizens, but innocent people. Obviously, that attack was unwarranted. Anytime you're killing an innocent civilian, it's wrong. I am a pacifist, so obviously that influences me. But I also don't want to pretend that all Christians are pacifists. I'm trying to represent as many of them as I can. I understand different points of view. I think if the Holy Spirit tells you to do violence, then you may do violence, but be sure it's the Holy Spirit and not a demon, right? So I am generally pretty pacifistic. As soon as innocent people start being harmed, I'm out. However, in that following month, there was more innocent people dead in Palestine than there has been during the entire war in Ukraine, for perspective. And that month has repeated and repeated and repeated. This is by far the deadlier war. We are participating in it, of course. As you mentioned before, Bryce, we are doing the same thing where we're having our contractors get wealthy and give bombs, armaments to Israel. And Israel has not been discriminate at all with those weapons. The conditions in Gaza have been terrible. Israel does have an area that they are permitted to be in, of course. After World War II, nations banded together to give them an area. That area was already occupied by Palestinians. It wasn't theirs to give, however, it was given. Israel has extended their boundaries into Palestine, into Gaza, into the West Bank. They are occupying that territory. That is both an opinion and it is also the legal truth of it. I mean, they are, they, even among their own Supreme Court, they regard it as an occupied territory. And
Right.
they're, and it's just, I think all of us as Christians lament the loss of life. None of us are, we're obviously talking about two different religious groups, but we're not taking sides. We are on the side of humanity. We're on the side of people, right? Like, this is not, I would be saying the same thing if one group was Christian and the other was Catholic, or Protestants versus Catholics, right? Like, this is simply about doing what's right to people and loving our neighbors. And we all want to see an end to that war. And it's only escalating. It is getting worse. Unfortunately, as you mentioned earlier, Bryce, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are basically identical on this issue. Kamala Harris promised the deadliest military in the world. She said she would back. In fact, she said she participated in all the discussions that Biden had on everything and would not have done a thing differently. So that is on her. Trump has said that we need to finish off Gaza. Obviously, now that he's stacking his cabinet, we can see that he is filling it full of people who agree with him and would like to finish off Gaza. It's a nightmare. Alex, I'll start with you. Any thoughts about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and anything through a Christian lens you would like to add?
I try to tread carefully with this topic just because it can trigger some people, but I genuinely don't agree with what Israel is doing. Like, I get, Hamas's leadership in Qatar eating at a buffet, Iran's lobbed missiles at Israel, and some capacity connected to this. I know that China's probably, and same thing with Russia, hoping that Israel loses the war or whatever. But something I've noticed too related to that is people see supporting Ukraine as a way to support Israel for some reason. Like, they tie the two together. Like, they say if you support Ukraine, you support Israel. And so they're anti-Ukraine. Because to them, being pro-Russian is being pro-Palestine. But I just don't think those made-up binary ideas are really all that Christian. Because I don't recall in the Bible God saying, and lob your strongest weapons at the Canaanites. He made an effort at first to at least talk to them. Prophets, disciples went out and talked to them. Like, they didn't just go, let's lob missiles and kill you with them.
Yeah. I'm gonna turn it over to you in just a second, Bryce, but you bring up an excellent point here. I think one of the tough things is it is complicated. I am anti-Zionist for sure. However, some people hear Zionist and they just think, does Israel, are those people allowed to exist there? Obviously the area was given to them. It was very wrong. I mean, they talk about when Israelis moved in, that there was still dinner on the tables from when they kicked the people there out. Like it should not have been given. That being said, it was given. At this point, undoing that is also wrong, right? This is two wrongs not making a right. So I believe that they deserve like to exist, as any property owner does. If you own a house, you deserve to have the house. Have the house, but at the same time, they can't be bombing their neighbors. They, like you said, they can't be hurling their strongest weapons at the Canaanites. They should not be doing this. If they were given a territory, they need to make peace with their neighbors and seek to make peace with their neighbors and do things that would make peace with their neighbors. Hamas needs Israeli aggression to continue, and Israeli, leadership, military leadership needs Hamas to continue. You even have evidence of these people waiting for each other. As soon as there's some kind of peace thing that's going to happen, it's sabotaged by one side or the other. And these are innocent people being jerked around by tyrannical leaders, and it's unfortunate to see. As you mentioned, it is really complicated. Bryce, any thoughts about Israel and Palestine?
Well, yeah. So I mean, for those that are watching this stream that don't know what Hodey's referring to, the Zionist movement moved down into what was known as Palestine shortly after World War II because they wanted to establish their own nation, and they for obvious reasons during the context of World War II didn't exactly feel very wanted in Europe. So they moved down there, and not too long after, the IDF was formed, which by their own admission during that time period, they were a terrorist organization. They were committing very just atrocious acts on the people of Palestine and kicking them out of their homes and chasing them out, and even more egregious than that. And what happened was there was a partition agreement that gave Israel, I believe it was 56% of Palestine, which obviously the Palestinians weren't too happy with, because it's like, whoa, these, like, the Zionists just got here. We were already here. What do you mean? Now, obviously, you could say hindsight is 2020, and considering now they own none of that land, maybe they should have just taken the deal. But fast forward to around the 60s, a war broke out with Israel and a bunch of other countries, and they ended up taking 78% of the territory, so they ended up expanding on it. And then I think another war broke out, and they just decided they were going to completely occupy Gaza on the West Bank. Where we're at right now, we're not even like necessarily asking for Israel, like, and even Hamas isn't asking for Israel to give them like the original borders. They just want the 1967 borders where Gaza and the West Bank are actually theirs and not occupied territory. And the unfortunate thing is Bibi Netanyahu and the Likud party, especially since their actions have been very unpopular even among their own people, have no intention on doing that, because they will probably get removed from office as soon as this conflict ends. I don't imagine they're going to remain in power for very long after it's over. And thanks to organizations like AIPAC, who will throw just stupid amounts of money campaigning against anybody who dares criticize Israel. Obviously, America is going to unconditionally back Israel, and it puts us in a very unfortunate position. And I do think that at least on the left, this position is why Kamala Harris lost. Half of the Democratic Party considers what is going on to be a genocide. And there's definitely some validity to that. At best, you could argue it's ethnic cleansing, but it's still removing an entire ethnic group from their territory. And when she decided that she was going to take the donor money instead of standing on a legitimate principle that at least half her party is behind, they decided that they were going to go vote elsewhere, mostly for Jill Stein and the Green Party.
Yeah, it's tough. It's like you said, when they called her Holocaust Harris and Genocide Joe, those were not labels they got from the right wing. Those are labels they got from their own party, right? Like people, like Democrats called them that. So it was it definitely, I agree with you, very likely cost her the election. We have Nice here. Nice, anything you want to talk about through a Christian lens about the war in Palestine, between Palestine and Israel?
What you mean the terrible people? No, it's I just came in to see what you guys were saying, but no, like I don't think that's why she lost. I think she just lost because she was just a terrible candidate on all fronts, right? Like it wasn't just like that. The Palestine issue was just you had 4 weeks, 4 months, or whatever when Joe dropped out, and you're just kind of like, well, what do I do? You know what I mean? It's like, do I just run on this? It was just too like milk toast, right?
Yeah.
Or how would I put it? Like too too like I pander to people that don't really care. I also pander to people that are just like middle of the road that weren't going to vote for me anyway. Then I alienated every white dude in the entire country. You know, you're Hitler and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So it's like, what are you going to do? You need those Zoomer votes. I don't have like an opinion on it. It's just like the Israeli thing and stuff. It's just what did I say? It's just all those people that are there say they are Israelis. Those people are Europeans. They probably shouldn't even be in that area in the first place, right? They're all like Slavic in origin and stuff like that. That's why they don't want you to do DNA testing and stuff. It's like, oh, because I'm actually from like, Bulgaria and stuff, So it's like, why are you even in there in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to, and this is a complicated situation, right? So you have in the 1960s, like we give Israel an area there, and shouldn't have. Like, it was wrong that they were kicked out. It's wrong that other people were kicked out and they're getting put back in. And now it's wrong that other people are getting kicked out so that they can expand. Maybe we need to learn that kicking people out is wrong. To put a Christian lens on all this, when we talk about peacemaking, blessed are the peacemakers, that's not just anti-war, right? Like that's pro-peace. What do you do to make peace? So like, I think when we get to the point is how do we avoid war? We've already lost it, right? Because we're basically hostile with each other, and I'm not talking about America, but 2 different nations are already hostile with each other. And at that point, we're not making peace. So if we make peace, let's look at what we do as far as business practices go. Like, there's the famous line where trade lines cross, armies don't, right? Like people don't blow up their business partners. So, do some multicultural trading, right? Like that's a good thing. Let's open that up. Let's help each other out. And I think that it's important for us as Christians to make sure that we are making peace and not just trying to avoid war. If you're just trying to avoid evil, I talk about this a lot. Like if you're trying to stay loyal to your wife and you're messing around with some girl, but just being like, well, we never did it, so it's not really cheating. It's like, okay, like that's not the point. The point is loyalty is an actual good, positive thing. It's not barely not cheating. That's the minimum, right? Like we're looking to do the maximum as Christians. When we talk about love versus hate, we want to give maximum love, not the minimum love until it crosses the line into hate. And so when we're dealing with war, a lot of times we're talking about unfortunately we're trying to do, like, what's the minimum we can do to avoid it, as opposed to how do we develop peace. And this is an important conversation to have right now, because Donald Trump has hired people, and he himself has talked about turning Iran into a glass sheet. He's talked about engaging in war with China, right? Like, as much as he campaigned for being against a war versus Russia and Ukraine, he has 3 wars that he is all in support of, and he has hired people that also support those wars, one of which is current, 2 of which would be new. And these are things that Christians need to think about now, because if we're going to make peace now, what do we need to do with Taiwan? What do we need to do with China? What do we need to do with Iran in order to prevent a war from occurring? And at the same time, not just preventing a war, but how do we, like, bless each other's lives? How is it we look at Iran and make them allies, as opposed to barely not enemies that we're not willing to bomb? Alex, you said you just remembered some context, so I'm going to let you talk a little bit before we move on to the election in general.
Yeah, so I don't know if we're still on the topic of Palestine and Israel, but
We are.
something that completely slipped my mind is Britain. I always humorfully tell people that it's Britain's fault that this war is happening, because they basically became in control of the Middle East, and they gave territory to the League of Nations. They gave territory to a prince and his brother who tried to attack him. They gave him territory. They gave territory to France, but then they also set aside land for the Muslims, and then that's the same land they tried to give to the Jewish people trying to escape Europe. And I forget the first name of the individual, but it was a member of the Rothschild family, the one you always see in the conspiracy theories. They sent a letter to the British government and told the British government that they wanted land, and basically Britain granted them the same land they promised Muslims. They promised land to the Muslims to have a Muslim country, and they promised that same exact land to Israel. And then the Jews that were not native basically took the side of Britain for their own safety, and were willing to fight against the Muslims if they broke out, did anything they weren't supposed to. And once World War II kind of broke out and then it ended, Britain just chucked the problem to the United Nations and said, it's your responsibility, you take care of this conflict that we helped create. And like Jewish militaries or militia groups were willing to side with the British Army and put down any Muslim uprisings.
Yeah, that's good historical context to know. Like, I mean, it's like, how far back do we go, right? Like, do we give this land back to the Native Americans? Okay, we could do that, but then do the Native Americans give it back to the tribes that they took their land from? I mean, we exist in a cycle of violence in this world, and the best we can do is make the best of the situations that we have. I don't want to say a bad situation. Everything's a situation. They're all different. They're all difficult. If the Bible were easy, then it would be very short, but it recognizes a lot of these gray areas that happen. And this is the need for the Holy Spirit, right? Like, for us to kind of be like, okay, I understand I'm not going to get something perfect out of here, but when I talk to God, when I use the Holy Spirit, what am I told that the best thing I can do is, right? Like, what's the best we can make of this situation? Is it dissolving Israel entirely and then leaving those people without homes, letting the Jews undergo another horror for them? At the same time, I understand that land should have been given to them, and it's given back to the people it was taken from. There's a lot to think about here. Like I said, my goal with this whole thing is not to tell you what to do or what to think. My goal is for you to get in touch with the Holy Spirit, to get in touch with Christ, and have them guide you, right? Like, have them help you out. We're just simply talking about it as Christians, and I'd encourage anybody here to talk about kind of the feelings that they get from the Holy Spirit when they are guided, like, what's the right thing to do here. Let's go back. Let's get into a little more of like the election-y talk, since that is the topic.
Can I get one more point in on the Israel-Palestine thing, and then we can move on?
Yeah.
I think that, and this is where I kind of I find it funny when like people like Constantine will start talking about first principles. I think the only consistent first principle to hold with this matter is natural rights are absolute. When you start from that principle where life, liberty, and property are absolute and they must be protected, okay, well, then the only correct answer, without starting to get into really murky, like historical territory and whatnot, is okay, Palestine has this territory. Their people live here. Israel, stop occupying it and go back to the territory that you have had claim to since the 60s at this point. And I think that would be a good place to start, even before getting into necessarily trade conversations, is occupation is a terrible idea. And the United States should have learned that lesson from when we ran Britain out of the 13 colonies. If people don't want to be ruled by you, it doesn't matter how superior your military is to them, you're going to lose. So it is in your best interest, if for no other reason than self-preservation purposes, to leave and stop occupying them. So that's kind of the last note I wanted to leave on that subject matter.
Yeah, none of it's going to be fair to everybody. Most of the people who are in Israel now were not part of that decision to move in. They weren't responsible for it. This is the life they've known. And I understand the difficulty when we tell them to move out, right? Like leave, right? Like, and the horrors that have already come with being, the diaspora and being kicked out of their homeland before. Like, this is I understand what a slap in the face that is, but we are trying to get them to do, I don't want to say the Christian thing, because obviously that's not their faith, but that's our interest, right? Is to make the best thing that can possibly happen. And I like what you're doing, Bryce, is we need to appeal to their conscience, not just to political figures, because political figures are just a result of the country's conscience, right? Like a healthy country is not going to allow an unhealthy leader. An unhealthy country will have an unhealthy leader. And so what we need to do is appeal to their conscience, appeal to their goodness, and just say, listen, I know what a sacrifice this is. I know how difficult this is. We need to relate to them, understand all this history that Alex was bringing up and Nice was bringing up, and everything that happened there. And then just say, like, listen, with that understanding, let's decide what the right thing to do is. What's the right thing to do?
Right.
I mean,
and
we
here's
can
the thing,
relate.
Hody. Let me clarify something, Hody, because I think you might have slightly misunderstood me. I wasn't saying that Israel should leave the land they actually own. I'm saying that Gaza and the West Bank, they need to stop occupying. I think that is completely within reason to do.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a blatant occupation. Yeah. All right. So to talk about this, let's go back to the main figures here. And I'm just going to talk about them directly, and I'm going to roundtable this here. As Christians, it is tough for me to see the Christian vote show up for Donald Trump the way that it did. This is a convicted sexual assailant. If you look at the documents, he raped that girl. The question in the jury is if sticking it halfway in counted. And they're like, they weren't sure. And so therefore he's only a sexual assailant, right? And I'm not one of those that's like, convicted felon, listen, I understand bad laws deserve to be broken and everything like that, but let's be honest, rape is not one of those bad victimless crimes that we're talking about here, right? This is somebody who's blatantly pro-war. This is, like I said already, this is the worst liar in the history of American politics, both by volume and by rate. And he hasn't even been in politics all that long, right? Like, this is somebody who, and I would even say there's a chance for the world. I haven't compared it. All I know is that particular statistic. This is somebody who is, when asked about like his favorite book of the Bible or verse of the Bible, had absolutely no idea of any of the verses in the Bible. Blatant charlatan. Like blatant charlatan. This is a guy who has no problem with nationalizing Christianity. he is so problematic on every front. I have to think that part of this is because the Democrats and the left wing has been so hostile to religious figures that they are desperate for somebody who, even while faking it, is at least willing to fake it, to say, I am on your side. And, you know, the hostility that you get from being a Christian in the left wing and treated like you're stupid and dumb, and that this is some kind of blowback. But why do you think the Christians fell for this? Why do they do this? What needs to be our message to Christians so that they stop supporting monsters like Donald Trump and start making better decisions? You know, what do we tell people? I guess, Nice, I haven't heard from you in a minute. How do the Christians end up with Donald Trump? What do we do to kind of fix this so that we start getting better consciences and better decisions and better leadership demanded from Christians?
Well, you're getting there's a thing that's called like you're a cultural Christian, right? Where it's like you're not really, religious. It's just a cultural background that's, passed down from your dad and your grandpa and his grandpa, his dad, right? So like they're cultural, right? These are the people that you see, it's like I'll quote you a Bible verse, but I'll be at this bar on Saturday fighting every dude here, you know what I mean? Just being like terrible people throughout the week. And then it's just like, but they'll give you, they probably don't even go to church at this point, right? They just say they are. But that's because they conflate your religion with normative whiteness, right? Like I'm a white dude in Ohio.
Right.
So therefore it's like I identify as like, Methodist, even though I haven't been to a Methodist church in like 15 years. And it's just, that's the problem you're seeing is like when the co-opted the evangelical right, there's probably like maybe 10% of those people in the evangelical right are just kind of like actually evangelicals, right? A whole majority of them are just kind of how would I put it?
I think you've praised it well so far. I think, cultural,
yeah. So it's like you can't really change their mind because they conflate that sort of like religious experience with like a cultural experience. So it's not really a religious experience for them. It's just how I've been raised and how my grandpa was raised. And like, I don't go to church and I can't even quote anything out of the Bible unless I can look it up on the internet. Right. But I'm going to vote for the evangelical right, not because I agree with like half the stuff they're saying. It's just, they don't like the people I don't like. Right. And like the people I don't like might just be, I don't like these trans kids and them telling me what to do and get me banned on Facebook because I state my opinion, or like, I don't like these Muslims or these Jews, right? Or like these people, I just don't like them. So it's more of like an enemy of my enemy than they just vote in that sort of manner. Like, I don't like these women that go on OnlyFans and, like spread eagle right here, show me everything. I hate women like that, right? And that's just, you've seen that with like a lot of the Zoomer vote, right? Where it's just like, I hate these OnlyFans girls, right? They're just terrible women. Women are trash. Modern women are terrible. I'm a passport bro now. And like, those are the people that were voting for Trump. Like, they're not someone that's going to go to church 3 or 4 days a week. They're just people that just identify that because it's a cultural experience for them that they just don't know any better. They're ignorant, right? That's the best way to put it. They're just straight ignorant to everything.
Yeah, it's an identifier for them as a voting bloc. I think that's an excellent point. I have a story that relates to this. So I heard about this on NPR, and I didn't believe the story at first. And it's this guy who was like, I talked about the parable, the Sermon on the Mount at church, and people went up to me and were like, "Oh, I think that's woke," and I rejected, like it's woke or whatever. Like, and I didn't believe it because I was like, well, it's still in the Bible, right? Like Christians are going to side with the Bible over being anti-woke. And then like a couple months later, I wish Aaron was here because he actually saw this conversation go down. I had 3 people on that were my friends on my timeline, on my posts. We were talking about the Sermon on the Mount, and they were like, yeah, I don't believe that part of the Bible. It's woke. And they were Christians, right? Like, we're Christians. As you've noted, Nice, these people are not faith Christians. They are Christian identifiers, right? Like that's their group of like people that they choose to hang with, and it's it was freaky to see because it, like I said, it feels like fiction. Like I did not believe the story until it happened to me. And now that it's happened, it's just kind of one of those things in the right wing that I'm just like, that is nuts. Bryce, any thoughts about like Donald Trump Christianity?
No, I mean, I think that this has been a problem for a very long time with kind of Christian nationalism in general, because the founders of like the founding principles of Christian nationalism don't invoke the Bible whatsoever because they don't actually believe the Bible. So it's not even like, well, they're Christian, like some of them are Christians, but they don't. Um, and then you got more of them that are culturally. That is true. Christian nationalism never even pretended to be spiritually Christian. It was always a cultural thing. They liked the cultural aesthetics of what they believed Christianity to be. Um, so that's kind of always been an issue. It will always continue to be an issue, and it's why um as like Christian anarchists, Christian libertarians, wherever you may fall at, uh we need to kind of watch out for the Christian nationalist faction because they don't care about the Bible if it doesn't fit their agenda. They never have and they never will. This predates probably everyone's life in this stream, and it will continue to exist that way.
I read the book, The Case for Christian Nationalism by Stephen Wolfe. He's a Christian nationalist or whatever. And like chapter 1, in fact, it may even be in the introduction. He's just like, by the way, I'm not going to use the Bible at all, like for this to make my case here. And like to your point, Bryce, it's like we're not even like faking that this is Christian. It's really just nationalism. As Nee said, this is Christianity is just what you've decided to dress it up as. You've taken a few select verses, maybe cut them out of context. You're viciously, I mean, and this is one thing that gets me, like viciously angry about some verses in the Bible. Like we'll go to their grave talking about like Romans chapter 13 and Romans 1, and we'll go to their grave thinking Romans 2 doesn't belong there. Like it's just like violent anger, unable for me to quote some verses of the Bible and not even add any context without them being like, you know, you're woke, you're terrible, whatever. Yeah, as you said, like not really very Christian, and hasn't. I'm amazed at how little they pretend to be, and yet Christians still seem to go for it, at least here in the United States. Alex, any thought about Trump and Christianity?
It is definitely an issue that I see. I have mixed feelings. Like, I don't want to necessarily say that people aren't Christian who voted for Trump. And I get that there are issues with Kamala Harris that pushed people into supporting Trump, with her, you know, trying to replicate a fair bit of what Trump had to say. But I do think there's a decent bit of unchristianness, for lack of a better term, in the moment with people supporting Trump, because Trump represents so much that a lot of Christians claim to hate, and then they go and they vote for him because the left is anti-Christian, or I got to put my political beliefs into a party. And it's kind of the same thing you see with like a demographic being told they have to vote for insert political party on either side of the duopoly because they have to. It's like, you belong to this minority group, so you have to vote Democrat. You belong to this religious group, so you have to vote for Republicans. And so a fair bit of it was just, I have to vote for the Republican because I'm a Christian. And I mean, there are other factors, like, I know people who voted for Trump purely because they resonated with someone being a fellow felon. You know, but it was just kind of shocking. Like, I was thinking that he was going to lose just because he'd already lost once. But something else had to have happened, because I look at the statistics and Kamala dropped by half, or Trump gained twice as much against Kamala with certain demographics. And I felt like a lot more Christians were going to vote for Joe Biden last time around, and now it's Trump this, Trump that, from like most of my Christian friends.
Yeah,
and
I mean, it was overwhelming, the Christian support for Trump. Sorry, go ahead and finish.
Yeah, and I just didn't fully understand it. I mean, some of my relatives who don't usually go to church on Sundays or that often ended up being the ones who voted for Trump, which I guess kind of shocked me, because even some of my more progressive Christian type family members kind of supported Trump. And it's like, you radically support gay marriage, but you vote for Trump. You don't want to punish immigrants, but you vote for Trump. And it's like, it's just all confusing to me that like they would go and vote for him. And then in the same breath, try to find somebody on the left who's just a complete stranger on the internet and use them as an example to condemn at a church service or something. Because plenty of these people are like pastors who then want to go on the sermon about how they condemn a certain group or demographic and just hate on them.
Yeah, our goal is to love, right? I mean, we're called the Love First Christians, and there's a reason for that. We believe that God is love. The Bible defines what love is. Christians want to, these types of Christians want to redefine what love is. Like sometimes it's loving if I do this or do this terrible thing or say this terrible thing. The Bible tells you what love is. Patient, kind, not boastful, hopes for the best, right? Like all these things that they are not. And like they hate that verse. Like they love the rest, but like they hate when the Bible tells them what love is. And it's really sad to see. There's actually over 400 verses about like being good to immigrants, which is like 4 times as many verses as there are about like how to get into heaven and salvation. Like being good to immigrants is more core to Christianity than Jesus dying and resurrecting, just by volume of verses. And it's obviously like when we tell the Christian story, of course, I'm not diminishing Christ's sacrifice or any of that importance. I'm simply saying that if you were to read the Bible and gather the messages from the Bible, you would see from beginning to end the importance of being kind to immigrants. And it's as you mentioned, like even pastors are just like, oh, they're here illegally. Why didn't they do it legally? Why did it? As though like Jesus was killed by the state. Like, oh, if only Jesus had proclaimed the truth legally, right? Like, please, right? Like legality is not how we measure our morality. It's not right that we do that. Let's flip this over to Kamala Harris. Obviously, she didn't get the Christian vote, but she got enough of them. A lot of the deconstructionists opted to go, instead of Trump, to go for Kamala Harris. I guess I gave a brief intro to Trump, so I'll do this for Kamala Harris as well. If you're the GNC chose, of course, because Biden dropped out late. Now they could have done a primary. They decided not to. They chose the person who got dead last in the primaries when there was a Democratic primary. The Democrats did not want her. And it's funny to imagine that, to see her getting dead last among the Democrats. And that was like, there was like 17 of them at the time. And with how, as we're seeing the percentages and things kind of get closer and closer, that they could have chosen almost anybody else and won, but they chose Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, I say this knowing Trump is a rapist and the worst liar in American politics. I've said that a few times already. Kamala Harris is probably worse as a person. And you think, what could be worse than that? How about sending somebody to death row when you withhold evidence of their innocence? Multiple people where you've withheld evidence that would have exonerated them. How about using a corrupt crime lab, knowing it's corrupt, and using the evidence to get convictions against innocent people and sending them to prison? How about breaking the law, literally, in order to keep prisoners working as slave laborers? These are non-violent prisoners, by the way. They were in prison for victimless crimes, non-violent crimes, placed into prison. They were kept to work as slave labor. The state of California ordered them free, and Kamala Harris did not free them and fought with the state until it was like she had no other avenues. You're talking about literal slavery, literally attempted murder. Who knows, with other people she's sent to the death row, maybe actual murder, right? Like framing people. This is, if you had, your only job was to do better, to give somebody with better character than Donald Trump, it was very easy to clear that bar, and you somehow still failed. Kamala Harris is, and then of course, I mean, obviously, whether it's war, she said she wouldn't do anything different than Biden. she almost outlied Trump during the campaign, which is amazingly impossible to do. It was something like during the debate, like 58 Trump lies to 45 Harris lies, which if you're even trying to compete with Trump as far as lying goes, like you're not going to win that battle. Trump's a better liar than you. I mean, he's not good at it in the sense of getting away with it. He's just much more frequent. But like anybody who valued honesty was looking for an option, and you gave them a non-starter. So, Anise, I'll start with you again. But Kamala Harris and Christians, obviously she didn't get the vote, probably for some pretty obvious reasons. You've mentioned the identifiers before, but just some other thoughts about her.
It's just like I said, she was just a bad candidate. You know, when you run as a Democrat and like the majority of your base is like left leaning, right? And it's like that's all the millennials that are going to vote for me. That's the black women that are going to vote for me. It's the Latino women, the Asian women. It's the transgender folk. It's like everybody that's on like this paradigm of like being on the left, and then you're just like, how am I going to run it? I'm just going to run it as like not Trump. I like my corporations. I like my taxes. I like my, I'm not going to give you universal health care. I know we promised to get rid of student loan debt like 10 years ago. We haven't done it yet. You know what I mean? It's like, I gave you all these promises I didn't do. And when you're that milquetoast, right? And like your whole base is left, you don't even like concede on like one leftist principle, right? And the only thing you're running is like, I'm not Donald Trump. And I'm also not really a Democrat. I'm a Democrat in the same aspect of like, I'm not going to ban your HRT. I'm not going to ban your abortions, right? And that's the only key point you're running on. The only people that are going to vote for you are like the same people already voting for you in the first place. You don't get anybody new. Like if your whole campaign was like, we're going to make sure like you still can get your abortions, you can still get your HRT, and that's all we're going to promise you because this is as far left as I'm willing to go. That's not good enough for like the base. So it's like I'm going to run on that platform, and that's it. It's like people really care about the inflation. They really care about where everything else is going, like infrastructure, all the stuff you haven't like really done anything about in like 10, 20, 30 years. That's just kind of absolutely wrecking people right now. But if that's all we're going to run on, I'm going to get my token votes and lose like, you know, several states, especially like these Midwest states, like, you know, Michigan, Pennsylvania, where most people are on like hourly wages and stuff.
Yeah, people are hurting. I cite this a lot, but there was something like in the first year after the pandemic, like 78% of people said the economy was so bad that they had to make a major life change. And things have gotten worse, right? Like buying a house, going to college, getting a car, making rent. It's all groceries, right? Like just growing and growing and growing. And the denial of, I mean, Kamala Harris went to her grave saying Bidenomics was working. It's just not working fast enough. It's not working. It was like working would at least mean it's like getting alleviated. These people would brag about like the sheer amount of inflation going down for a month, but that still means it went up. It's just not up as bad as it was the previous month. Like it was so blind to the working class person. And I'm glad you bring that angle up, Nice, because I think that's very important. When we're talking about Christians, we're just talking about regular people. And when you ignore just what regular people and the issues they're going through, Jesus was a master of this, right? Like, what are you going through? Are you hungry? Are you hurting? Are you blind? Are you deaf? Are you poor? Right? Let's fix whatever the issue is. Whereas Kamala Harris just wanted to kind of make believe that all those would go away and hope that enough people would show up who wanted to join her in this land of make-believe, offering nothing really substantially different to alleviate these people's pain. Yeah. Bryce, any thoughts you have about Kamala Harris and Christianity?
Well, and I believe I actually addressed this in the comment section of one of your previous live streams not too long ago. Kamala Harris, and it's really funny because she basically ran on absolutely nothing that she ran on in 2020. She basically ran on the idea of being, I am going to run as the machine. I'm going to run as the establishment. And unfortunately, 74 looks like it might even end up being 75 million Americans voted for that, which is a bit of Black Phil. I wish I could say that it was just Kamala Harris out of that faction that tried to sell people on the idea that the economy was actually good. But then you got people like Alan Lichtman, who's made his career basically off of being really, really accurate at predicting presidential elections with his 13 keys to the White House. And he sat there and tried to say the short-term economy and the long-term economy were in good condition and gave those keys to the Democrats. And it's like, are you blind? What are you talking about? Like, have you tried to go fill up your gas tank recently? So it's just, it is deeply unfortunate because the DNC could have, like, obviously I'm a libertarian. Economic left populism obviously isn't something I want any more than economic right populism isn't something I want. But had they ran an economic left populist, they probably beat Donald Trump, probably by a landslide even.
Yep.
And they didn't. They ran the establishment, and they got what they deserve.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, like, just strategically, Americans do tend to vote for comfort, right? Like, we don't want somebody too radical. A lot of times, the Libertarian Party, that's not why they're not popular. The Libertarian Party is massively discriminated against in the American political cultural system. That we have to jump through so many hoops the other parties don't have to go through. I did campaigns for both the GOP and the Libertarian Party, and it is night and day, I'll tell you that. But another reason is just because our ideas are radical. They push things and people get scared of them. I think Kamala Harris was trying to go for comfort. And unfortunately, people are discomforted right now. So the status quo, what she was hoping is people would say, like, oh, I'll take more of the same. Fine. At least things aren't too different. Thing is people are hurting. I mean, consider the stat I talked about earlier. Not minor life changes in order to stay afloat. Major. When 9/10 of Americans have had to make a major life-changing choice because the economy is so poor. That should have been an alert to say, like, we need to at least preach some hope, preach something different. When you get up there and say you wouldn't do anything different and we're going to keep the status quo going on, yeah, what did you think was going to happen? Niece, you mentioned this and I forgot to bring it up, but like, she tried to run, like, of course, be abortion. But what did Donald Trump do? He said he was going to be the best women's reproduction rights president ever. So then she didn't even have that, right? Like, and of course, it's probably a lie with Donald Trump as everything out of his mouth. But I mean, all we have on her word is her word, and hers isn't very good either. So, it just kind of robbed that momentum. Alex, we'll end with you. Any thoughts about Kamala Harris and Christianity and Christians?
I completely agree that Kamala Harris did things wrong and that she wasn't popular. I mean, I was thinking a lot of people would see her as no better than Biden and just straight up go for a third-party candidate, which was something I was kind of hoping. Because it seemed like there was a lot more energy from the left to look for that third-party voice. Whether it be someone like Chase, which things unfortunately happened for him, or even Jill Stein, who is a recycled, retired, kind of tired, old candidate type situation. But from my point of view, it was kind of just like she was trying to appeal to Republicans and basically appeal to anybody who wasn't a Democrat. Like Tim Walz was up there claiming to represent libertarians, and Harris was too. But that just wasn't the case. And then they kept trying to appeal to Republicans. And it's like, Jesus didn't say appeal to your opponent by blaming them for a border wall they wanted to build getting stopped. Like, she wanted the border wall stopped, and now she claims it needs to continue and it's Trump's fault, when she was the one in office. And I don't think Christians, at least the ones that wanted to vote for Trump, necessarily wanted more of the same. Because part of it is she had 8 years to offer if she were to get reelected. Trump, legally speaking, only had 4 to offer. And some people probably want to just get Trump out of the way instead of having Harris for 8 years. And they hoped Harris losing would send a message to the Democrats to pick someone more Christian, but also somebody simply a better candidate, quality-wise.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, and something that was discussed in my household, how it's like, at least, because we all know Trump would run again in 4 years. I mean, the Republican Party is his, so like we were just kind of saying like, hey, at least this can be the last hurrah for Trump. The Republican Party will have to move on. The Democrats won't just be able to be like, we're not Trump anymore, and like we can stop talking about him, like it'll be something else. You open this up, Alex. I think all of us are I know us personally, we're on the liberty spectrum. Now we are talking with the Love First Christians. We're talking with people that aren't necessarily libertarians. I have not just welcomed, but we have people from, we probably have more non-liberty people than liberty people within the Love First Christians. We are a group that is primarily focused on Christ's love and God's love, and it's not necessarily political. But everybody who's on this call is somewhat involved with the liberty movement. So I will say, like, we're going to talk about it. I don't think it's inappropriate, because I do think that God wants us to be free. I mean, this is in the Bible, right? Like, that God's plan for us is to be free. The whole reason the universe exists and that there is agency and that there's all these difficulties we have is because God wants us to choose him at the end of the day. Choice is important to God, to the point where he didn't just keep us all in heaven. We've got this big old plan, and we can choose our path forward from here, right? Like, agency is a big deal. Choice is a big deal. Liberty is a big deal. It's there throughout the Bible. That's something that Christians have, as well as like libertarians and anarchists and stuff have. The Libertarian Party this cycle decided to sell out their candidate. I know Chase Oliver personally, so here's just another point of bias, but I have to talk about it because it matters, right? Like, I want to be honest with you, and that bias is going to shade the conversation I have here. But I know Chase personally. We talk in private comments. He probably messages me. It's slowed down to like once every couple of weeks because he's been on the campaign trail. But this is somebody who's a personal friend of mine. We were in a podcasting group together, and on my own personal show when I was doing Enemy of My Enemy, and he was a contributor to that. Chase is somebody I've done revolution work with, who we have, when the cops in North Ogden tried to shut down the homeless camp that we have here. This is a boots on the ground guy, who would show up and physically be like, if you want to get to them, you got to get through me, and you can arrest me if you want to. Chase is a person who's tasted tear gas, whether it was protesting against the lockdowns or protesting against war. He is a street guy, very much a revolutionary. And like I said, like, just a really good personal friend of mine, a man of faith, great Christian. Like, obviously he's a sinner, right? Like, and all have sinned and fallen short, of course, like all of us, we're all there, but not a rapist, not a slaver, right? This is somebody who is a good, loving person. And the Libertarian Party decided that this would be the best time to sell out Chase Oliver, betray their own candidate, betray the will of the delegates, and throw their support behind Donald Trump. It happened. They did it. It was successful. Chase got very few votes, undid a lot of the progress that the Liberty movement happened to be making behind the Libertarian Party. The promises in exchange were that Trump would free Ross Ulbricht, that would be having less wars, that he would put both a small L and a big L libertarian in the cabinet. That obviously hasn't happened, and it doesn't look like it will happen. He's still got 4 positions remaining, so I will allow Trump the opportunity to keep his promises. But if you ask any of his previous wives or business partners or anybody who has ever done work with him, we probably shouldn't be holding our breath for him to keep his promises here. And we sold out for that, and with the idea that this would be our chance to advance liberty. I am butthurt about it is the best way I can describe it. I feel personally betrayed. Trace was a great representative for me. He's a minarchist. I'm an anarchist. Obviously, we don't align perfectly on all the issues, but this is a guy who got up in front of a debate crowd. I mean, I talked about his revolutionary chops before, but he debated Art Laffer. 1 out of 5 people that was like leaning Trump decided that he wasn't the best for liberty, and they would go closer to the Chase Oliver side. They changed their minds towards Chase in an Oxford style debate on the Soho forums. It was like 21% of the people. Art Laffer is a great debater, and Chase wrecked it. I mean, just there is no. Chase is an excellent speaker, and that was him speaking to the right-leaning crowd. As has already been mentioned, as Alex, you mentioned, Chase pulls even better. In fact, Angela McArdle, chair of the Libertarian Party, said this herself. Chase pulls even better from the left. This was somebody who could have pulled 1 in 5 Republicans that heard his voice had the Libertarian Party thrown their support behind him. This is somebody who could have pulled a lot of Democrats, even more Democrats, to his side. But that didn't happen because the Libertarian Party decided to sell him out and go for Donald Trump. I'm just going to open it up. Any thoughts that you have behind that? Nice, I'll start with you.
The McArdle thing? No, it's the Libertarian Party has like a problem of electing people, especially into positions of like I'm gonna like, kind of run the party of opportunist, right? Where it's just like I win, I get to like make my own agenda, I get to do things. What was the thing she did? Like she had a PAC, right? The money just flows from the PAC to like her accounts and stuff like that. And then like Heist was on like that Bitcoin thing for a while, using like the Libertarian platform to promote the Bitcoin. You know what I mean? It's just like you get these people all the time. They put them in power because it's like they're snake oil salesmen, right? It's like, oh, Trump will give me a cabinet position, right? It's like, no, not really. I mean, it's like, what are you pulling it for? It's like, well, he'll make things a little bit better. Well, there's no wars. It's like, bro, they bomb things all the time, man. It's like, oh, it's like there'll be no war with China. It's like there's not gonna be war with China anyway, but it's like not on his agenda not to do stuff like that. But when you get these opportunists, like they're very short-sighted. It's like I win, I get my caucus in here, I win, I get to make like little policy changes here and there. Then you have like a bunch of fallout and drama, like the Harlow drama and stuff like that, because everybody's just kind of out for themselves and uses the party as a vehicle to be like effectively a salesman, right? So like all these people that just end up re-electing into like these positions are just absolute trash. Like they don't do anything for the party. They don't help anybody in the party. Like I think threw Chase under the bus, like you said, because it's like, well, you know, Donald might let me be Secretary of the Interior. It's like, no, you're going to be still working at the Circle K making $12 an hour, bro. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, why would he let you? You know, out of all these people he can pick, all these people with like money, influence, you know, I could put millionaires, billionaires. I could put Elon Musk in there. I could put like these streamers that have like 1 million people, like all these people that have like actual clout. Why would he put you, who works 8, 9, 10 hours at a fucking Circle K, into a Secretary of the Interior, right? Like you're brain dead if you think that was the case. It's like, yeah, he's not that great of a guy, you know what I mean? But it's like he's at least going to promote people that are either going to A, suck up to him, B, have reach that can like put more attention on him, or C, have money that they can influence other people. You have none of those things, and to think that you are going to be put into a position of power, you're drunk. You know what I mean? You're drunk if you think that's the case.
Yeah. As you mentioned, it was common sense we're going to get lied to, and then you go to you go to a notorious liar, and big surprise, we got lied to. Yeah, it's Bryce. Any thoughts about it?
I mean, okay, so obviously, I told you pre-stream kind of where I stand with the McArdle Trump stuff. I was never super being a member of the Mises Caucus, I was never super optimistic that he was going to follow through on that. Anyways, I will say that as it pertains specifically to Chase, because you and I have had this conversation before on other live streams, I don't think Chase was the right candidate for the LP to run this election cycle. Anyways, I think this election cycle was the perfect opportunity for us to run somebody more radical and not a minarchist type candidate. Could the LP have done more to help him? Absolutely. I'm not going to deny that. With that said, being in the Liberty movement, admittedly, I didn't hear a whole lot about his campaign. And I'm not in a super Mises Caucus heavy state. So, as a matter of fact, a lot of people in my state support Chase from the Libertarian Party. So I would have, it would have been nice if I could say that I heard anything out of that camp. And I don't think that's necessarily your fault. It's probably not even Chase's fault, but to not hear anything from his campaign at all, I mean, at the end of the day, like, somebody needs to be held accountable for that. And I don't think it's exclusively the LNC. It is part, for sure, but part of that does kind of have to fall back on Chase and his campaign team for not promoting him.
I mean, he had 1,300 mentions in news sources, including CNN, Fox News, BBC, C-SPAN, NPR.
But it's also
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
I'm sure I'm not saying he had no, like, zero mentions. I'm saying that, relatively speaking, like, I heard more about Jill Stein being connected to the Liberty circles than I did Chase Oliver, and Jill Stein's not a libertarian.
well, she runs every year, so she's consistent, right? So the thing with the Green Party is the Green Party and all these other third parties, they're very consistent. Like, it's the same people, that are going to run, it's the same party infrastructure. So every time you go to a libertarian convention every 4 years, it just completely blows apart because you have a bunch of people vying for these positions that kind of like, I'm going to flop out the entire LNC. Then you got like 20% of the people leaving because I don't like these people, right? Then 20% more people is like, well, if they're leaving, I'm leaving too. So you're absolutely unstable. So you're never going to have like a good candidate. You're never going to have like the money, the infrastructure to even run a good candidate if every 4 years I'm just going to shoot myself in the foot and like completely upend the party and completely change the party ethos every 4 years. That doesn't work. Like, the reason Republicans and Democrats are so successful is not just because they're a major party. It's because going back hundreds of years, they didn't upend it. Like, you've seen this a lot in like the late 1900s or in like early 20th century with like a lot of socialist parties. They have a really strong socialist party and then they disagree on certain things, right? I think you're not hard enough on like, this land value taxation. Well, I don't like land value taxation at all. Then they splinter, they form new socialist parties, Socialist Party of America, Socialist Party Worldwide. And the more they fracture, the more they can't run candidates. Now they're irrelevant. Like, you'll see them like every year, every 4 years of like, hey, my socialist candidate's running that gets like 0.01% in a state race because there's like 10 different socialist parties running on that same ticket. In the Libertarian Party, you're like, yeah, it's not going to fracture like that. But every 6 years or whatever, you just completely eviscerate your entire like donor base. You eviscerate your LNC by electing people that most people don't like. No one really liked like Harlos, right? It was just like I got railroaded by the last previous administration by these woke, commies and stuff. It's like, it's like, shut up, lady. Just do the paperwork. You know what I mean? Like, half these people, it's like, how do you even have a job, man? If you're like this confrontational, combative over everything you want to say and do, it's like y'all should be fired living in a ditch. And that's the strongest thing about Trump is like, he will fire you and put you in a ditch. You know what I mean? Because this is exactly how he does it. But you can't have like a functioning libertarian party. You can't have a functioning candidate if like literally I'm being run by the most absolute loserish people I've ever seen in my life. Like, every time they talk or go on like, webcam or talk like I'm doing successful, like, you're successful in what, bro? Being broke? You know what I mean? It's like, that's the people running the party. You're a bunch of losers, man. And like, until they're gone, what can you do?
I mean, you're not wrong to mention the broke part, which they quite literally are. I was talking to someone on the LNC not that long ago, and they said if you take away the RFK money, they're in debt. The RFK money is allowing them to spend more than they're making otherwise. And they have basically until February to control their spending, or else they're going to go truly bankrupt at the national level.
Party of fiscal responsibility, right? They go into debt every year, man.
Well, and like, I live in a state where, Chase was popular amongst our delegates largely because he actually showed up and did the work, like Cody says. Like, he was one of 4 candidates invited to debate back when it was just 4 major candidates, and Lars Mapstead, for whatever reason, didn't show up. And same thing with Hornberger. And it was just Chase and Mike Tremont, acting all buddy-buddy like they're friends because they're libertarians, and they didn't have too much to disagree on. But he did the work to show up, and Mike did to a lesser extent the same thing. And they showed up at my region conference specifically together and debated. And Chase ended up winning most of that region because he did the work to show up in person, to petition, to talk to them. And some of these other people were in a different boat. They were more on the LNC side of things.
Yeah, but the work doesn't matter. Like, you can do all the work you can. You can be the hardest working candidate that you've ever put. But as long as your party infrastructure and your party leadership and your party donors are just like the absolute worst people to deal with, like, you're going to go nowhere. Like, Chase could have been out there every day, 12 hours a day, knocking on doors, state to state, like, spending tens of thousands, hundreds of dollars on ads and like stuff like that. It doesn't matter when the party infrastructure is completely just full of like the worst people.
I know, and I can see that because the nature of the situation too is it negatively impacted other candidates. Like, the LNC drove away some of Donald Rainwater's biggest donors, and that impacted his bottom line with his votes. His largest donor bought ballot access for Joe Jorgensen in Illinois. The LNC and folks who took it over chased that guy away. That guy was donating millions of dollars to LP candidates during his time in the party, and was a lifetime member to at least 2 state affiliates and national. And he donated his money strategically. He didn't just do what plenty of people would do and buy memes or buy yard signs galore. Like, he was smart with his money.
It was all because of like what? Woke people. Like, they went on this like tangent of like, we need to make like stuff less woke. It's like, have you ever been outside, like ever walked around your town? You're like, went to like a Walmart or a Target or something and look at like average everyday people. Like 99% of the people you come across in your daily life, if you actually leave your basement, are just normal people. Like, they go to work, they come home, they buy groceries, they cook dinner, they go to bed, right? But they're like, there's so many woke people and it's ruining America. That's like 1% of the people online that you deliberately seek out to argue with, man. It's like all these crazy radical feminists that want to like, do all this stuff. It's like, you have to seek them out. Like, if you go outside, they're nowhere to be found. You literally go in these circles, these debate circles, these political circles, these high charge, like, interest groups that are isolated echo chambers like a Reddit, right? And be like, oh man, like the country's so woke and things are just breaking down because all these like crazy left commies. It's like those are like 100 people in a group you're arguing with, bro. You know what I mean? That's not even like anything that you would see going out in public or actually engaging with people. You're taking online vitriol and like online shit posting and taking it as like a serious fact that this is how America is. And like, they run on that like entire platform and chase people away because we got to stop the woke. It's like, who's woke, bro? Like, I walk outside my town right now. There's a guy at a gas station selling like me, like cigarettes and drinks, and then there's like a couple people down at the bar, and then these none of these people are woke, man. Like, who are you talking about? And that was like their entire thing is like, we got to get the woke out of like everything. It is so astronomically small, the amount of people that are like that. And you have to deliberately seek them out. Like, you have to go into like spaces where they are to engage in like their insanity.
And I see some of that issue too with some of the people in the LP. Is like, what was it? It was a Twitter conversation I saw. Chase condemned, Operation Warp Speed to show his opposition to the lockdown. And a guy who moved to Florida purely because he thought Ron DeSantis was the best governor on COVID attacked Chase for basically going after, Project Warp Speed and calling it out for, all its statism and whatnot. And it's like, you got lockdown in your name on Twitter because you oppose the COVID lockdowns and you vote for Trump because the left is so bad on COVID, according to you. And now you're getting mad that the Libertarian is condemning a Republican for all the efforts he's bragging about with Operation Warp Speed. But then also with the woke thing, at the city level, I don't know if you saw the brief glimpse, the 5 seconds of fame, but there was a lady that went by Forest Mommy named Jessica something with an F. she basically ran as an anti-woke candidate, and in return, the Libertarian Party in her state wasn't going to run in a specific district that a Republican was running in, and both her and the Republican lost their respective races, but her whole thing was being anti-woke to a fault. Like, she clicked. You know, you'd click Twitter and you'd see some of these YouTubers who hate Disney Star Wars because it's woke and evil. Those were the kind of people she basically was engaging with. And it's like, you've gone from claiming some word that was used 50 years ago in a high school reading of Shakespeare to whatever gobbledygook is in this video by a random YouTuber is like the thing that you just talked about. It's like, the Libertarian Party is not going to win people over if they're just going, this quartering guy or this Geeks and Gamers guy, they're the man. They know everything. Like,
Yeah.
I want to listen to somebody who talks about how, say, mortgages are overly expensive, or rights like guns or Fifth Amendment or whatever is being trampled on matter. Not, can we sit there and condemn these people because they worked on a Disney Star Wars film?
It's low-hanging fruit, man. It's like, it's so easy for me to, you know, go on like whatever streamer's website or whatever, like, you know, isolated group with a bunch of like dudes and be like, oh man, y'all so woke, you're ruining my country, and like completely ignore like how like 99% of people actually are, because it gives it not only is it low-hanging fruit because it's easy just to engage in arguments with them, but it's like some people just, it gives them like a dopamine rush to argue with people and think they're right? Like, I'm gonna argue with this like, you know, commie over here, and like I'm totally owning them in the debate, right? It's like, who cares? No one cares about your debate, bro. It's like literally non-factor. You just get that dopamine rush because like look how fucking, you know, edgy I am, right? And like how I'm just like slamming this dude, and people are giving me likes and comments and laugh reacts. You know they're mad, and they go back to the little like Discord holes, group chat, screen cap it. Like, look how mad they got it, right? It's like, bro, you're like, it's like Jeremy Kaufman, right? In like New Hampshire, right? Like,
That's my best friend.
You know, it's like you're so edgy. It's like you're 40, 50 years old, man, and you're acting like, you know, when it's like the late 90s, early 2000s, I'm on 4chan and I got to get my boys to see how hard I said the R word, right? Like, it's like gamer chat for you. And like, they're like that. It's like a dopamine rush because like they just screen cap it, share it with their friends, and they laugh at it. And it's like, what do you really accomplish by that besides like your little small circle of friends that say like, oh, you totally own the wokes, right? You didn't do anything. It's like no one cares about your debate or like the stuff you say. Like, you pop on Twitter, you say stuff like that, you say stuff on Facebook like that, Blue Sky, whatever, and like no one cares. They're gonna argue with you because they just want the dopamine hit. That's all they argue with you about.
Yeah.
I've heard of. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, Keith, Keith is joining us. Keith, obviously, we're just talking about the Libertarian Party, and
that's what summoned me. Someone said the word woke 17 times in a row, and I appeared.
It pinged. Gotcha. And now here you are. All right.
Someone's talking about me.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Jeremy Kaufman subscribes to the pizza cutter ideology of all edge and no point. I've heard many people assert, and I believe that his entire point is not to bring people into the Libertarian Party. It's to make the Free State Project the only viable option for people in New Hampshire. I don't think that he's trying to court anyone. I think he's just trying to be as awful as possible, and he does a good job.
Yeah. So the Libertarian Party right now, I'm having a tough time with it because obviously that's where I came from.
I'm having a tough time with it.
Yeah, and it's listen, when there was a hot mic moment at the LNC, and this person is surrounded by other people, having a conversation with multiple people, and the mic, he's talking about how he can tell somebody's intelligence by their race and their penis size by their race, and talking about how we can't possibly be desperate enough to elect a gay person, right? Like, that would just be like the worst, thing that we could do. And he's surrounded by people. This is a normal conversation in the Libertarian Party, right?
I was desperate enough to. Yeah. There's
an update to that story.
Yeah, go ahead.
He did something similar at a city council meeting and made the news in his city.
Oh, I am. This is Avi. What's his name? I mean, didn't he get
Yeah.
like expelled from his own school for dropping the N-word? Like, I mean,
He is a consistent person.
right. And this is somebody who is welcome in the libertarian movement, and not only welcome, like shows up, has a conversation about all his racist beliefs and all his. I mean, this is a guy who's like, hey, if the law were suspended for a day, I would rape somebody. You know, like because and anybody who's saying they wouldn't is lying to you, right? Like this is a normal person to meet at the Libertarian Party. That's unacceptable. Like as Christians, how do I justify
humans? Yeah.
Right, like yeah, and I'm trying to talk about this through like a Christian lens, and Keith, I'm gonna turn things over to you. I'm just trying to kind of recap what we kind of got into the weeds a little bit on here. But like, okay, who was second to Chase Oliver? Like, who was the guy who almost got elected? Right, Michael Rectenwald. This is a guy who spreads.
Did he endorse Trump, or he just like endorses all of Trump's policies?
I mean, this is a guy who did endorse Trump, but not this cycle, I believe, but did before, right? This is a guy who said he went from socialist to MAGA in a month. He made all the news cycles right when it happened. This is a guy who's been caught in so many lies, it's hard to keep track of. It wasn't his Twitter account when he was telling kids that, like, he was excited for kids to kill themselves, and then of course, it went to court, and we found out it was. And then this is a guy who only donated to Trump because of the impeachment. But then we look at the dates, and the donations are well before the impeachment. I mean, this is a guy who can't.
The gummy did a lot of work for us.
The gummy, yeah. This is a guy who. This is a guy who calls people. And I apologize, earmuffs, for any kids listening. This is a guy who still calls people fags, who calls Chase Oliver a fag. You know. For being gay. This is a guy.
He has a sizable following still.
Yep. Anti-Semitic. I mean, the guy's Twitter is more popular than Chase.
Yeah, that guy's libertarian.
Yeah. I mean, he is, and this is the guy who was waiting in the wings for Chase. This is the guy the Mises Caucus endorsed and selected. And then who did we want? Like, who did?
I mean, some of that less people see hatred and they click it so they can follow it, because that's what they're here for. But right.
And who is the less controversial choice of all of them? If Dave Smith ran, he would have got it. This is a guy, I caught his appearance on Tower Gang podcast. He still calls people faggots, still calls people retards, still calls people kikes. This is a guy who talks about militarizing the border still. This is the guy who says, and everybody talks about like the legality of, if you get, you know, if somebody has sex with you after you have 12 shots and you consented, and he said, cry me a river. I'm less concerned about, like, people are like, well, they did technically consent. Is that exactly what he said? I'm less concerned about that.
And more to be as accurate as possible. I'm sorry. It was specifically someone that you got drunk, knowing that they didn't want to have sex with you, and you get them wasted so that they cannot consent. Like, that's even, he makes the worst possible case for it. It's not even like someone went over to your house and they got a little tipsy and they came on to you. It's, you know, they don't want you, and you get them wasted so that they can't consent.
Right. And then he says, cry me a river about it after you get raped or whatever. Right. Like, this is so me as a Christian here, and I'm trying, like, how do I justify any of this in the Libertarian Party? I don't know how to bring somebody into this. This is not our culture. Like, this isn't even stuff that would fly for the Republicans or Democrats, right? Like, it would fly for them. Like Trump doesn't run on being a rapist. Dave Smith advertises saying, I don't care if you said no and somebody gives you 12 shots and then you say yes and you have sex with them, right? Like,
at least with Trump, it's a leak that then his followers support.
So correct, yes. So like,
he's not volunteering. He's not volunteering.
So to add to that too, you mentioned the thing about Rectenwald. Mike Tremont almost beat Chase Oliver in part because of the desperation to not have Rectenwald win in that moment.
Yeah.
People thought that Rectenwald supporters would be amendable to voting for Mike Tremont as the alternative to Rectenwald. And we're desperately trying to make that happen because I was told to my face on the convention floor that if Mike Tremont did not beat Rechtenwald, 16 states were going to disappear, along with an LNC member. Gone. Out of the party. On top of New Mexico, so it'd be 17 total states gone. All because Rechtenwald got the nomination and he was going to be that bad. And plenty of state leadership were at the convention openly saying that they'd happily pick somebody that isn't him, throw him on their ballot, that had already been running, or another candidate. Maybe even give it to Vermin Supreme or someone else that used to be involved with the LP.
Yeah,
Because
but
how bad
That goes
Rechtenwald
to the
is.
instability Nice was talking about, right? Like this is no, like how can you have a political party when things are this tenuous? When all your delegates almost get like disqualified the day of the convention, like it's ridiculous. This is not a
no,
normal
it's like
way.
it's
It was quite a night.
you're it's I'm not a nap libertarian, right? But it's just definitely just like overly civil society. It's like some of the stuff these people say, man. It's like, have you been in a fight before? Because like, I don't know, bro. Like, you think Michael Reichwald could like, take Tyson sort of situation, right? Would you say the stuff to Mike Tyson, even though he's old and lost to Jake Paul, right? You wouldn't, It's like it's this comfort thing with them that annoys me, right? Like I'm going to be like this racist dick, and I'm going to say like all this stuff and this mean stuff because I'm sheltered in my little LNC nap thing, and no one's going to check me for it, right? It's like no one's going to come up and like I say, some gamer words, and no one's going to come knock my teeth out, right? Because I'm at the Libertarian Party convention. We're just going to nap it up. But honestly, it'd be kind of funny to watch, like, a fist fight break out. It'd be kind of funny. It'd be like, you're saying some stupid stuff. You have free speech, but not freedom from consequences, right? That's exactly what needs to happen. And it's like, because these people are only challenged by people saying words back to them, they get away with it, right? So it's like, I'm not saying I condone the violence, but I can see like possibly, you say some like atrocious stuff, someone checks you over it, right? Like stop hiding in your, because they're also in the echo chamber. No one's going to check you over it. I never see, these people that say this stuff say it outside of a place where it's not like 4-year-old out of shape white dudes, right? It's like you're saying this really racist stuff, man. I don't see you saying that in like the burbs of Chicago. You know what I mean? I see you saying it like an LNC convention in like New Hampshire.
As an out of shape white dude, I don't condone the violence there. Like I don't think that someone should get punched in the face if they're a bigot, but they also shouldn't be tolerated. Like the problem is not that they don't get assaulted. The problem is that they continue to be welcomed in the movement.
Like back in like the dark ages, I'd probably just burn you at the stake, man. To be honest with you, but it's just like we.
I mean,
man,
When Nice says he's an old school Christian, he means old school, like 1200s school.
I'm out here trying to bring back Byzantium, man. Like we just gonna bring it back. Let's get the Hagia Sophia back, dude. We good.
I actually just read about Byzantium last week in our book club. Keith, I wanted to give you your final words on this before. I have one final subject. I want to talk about Christians and what we do going forward. But obviously, Keith, as a Christian who is in the liberty movement, your thoughts on just what happened, advice you would give, observations you have about the Libertarian Party selling out for Trump, and from a Christian lens, whatever you got for us.
Would it suffice if I just cry into the camera for 5 minutes?
That's what I feel like doing.
Yeah. So I as a Christian, I feel like I hope that even if I was not a libertarian, I would not support Trump. Like I don't think I would support Harris either, but oh my goodness, like he was just advertising how awful he was, how he was going to deport people, how he was going to, you can't claim to be Christian and also want like the mass deportation of millions of people. Like his policies advertise suffering. Like he's cruelty is like what people are voting for. And so, as a Christian, that's offensive. As a libertarian, that's offensive. Like he has so many positions that are anathema to human freedom, that for the party and its leadership to not only support him with words, but to fundraise for him through proxy, it was not great. I'm hopeful that we can turn things around. I don't know if that's possible. I mean, it looks right now. Right now we have a few decent pockets in the party still. Like I'd like to think Louisiana's good.
They're my
Texas
personal
is good.
favorite.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We still have it. I like the message of liberty. Like the platform brought me in, the statement of principles brought me in, and as a Christian, both of those things spoke to me. Like I appreciate that they consistently value human freedom, that they support independence and freedom of religion, and when I joined the party, I really think that's what it was. There was always a bit of an undertow with certain groups, but it wasn't the leadership of the national party doing this sort of thing. I hope as an LNC member that I can make a bit of a difference on that, but I also realize that I'm a small minority within a minority party. I don't know, I guess we'll see how it goes. I think we're still viable as far as third-party options go for people who have a moral objection to what the Republicans and Democrats are doing. But I hope we stay that way. I can. There's a lot of danger of us not.
Yeah. You mentioned like the villainy being the point, and I think that's one of the scariest parts of kind of this election here is the deportations weren't like something that was just. I feel like the left deportation still happened. Obama deported more people than Trump or whatever.
But they don't advertise it as like, hey,
Correct.
we're going to mass deport people. And then when someone's like, well, what about their families? We're gonna deport the families too. We're gonna kick their children out. We're gonna kick the parents out. That's I realize that happens under Democrats also, and I'm not a Democrat.
You're right.
But that wasn't a selling point of Obama's. It was a point of shame. It
Yes,
wasn't. He wasn't riling up his supporters with it. It was something that people attacked him with.
Yeah. So one final question here, just because we're on the home stretch here, and I'm going to go around here. I'm going to ask, what do Christians do now? Like for when we think about elections, when we think about politics, what advice do you have just for a Christian person going forward? What do you want to see for the Christian movement going forward? What do you observe the Christians do this time, and what are you hoping they do next time? Any advice you have from somebody who's looking at all these options and just says maybe all of them are acceptable, or maybe I was a Trump voter, maybe I was a Harris voter, whatever it may be. But kind of your closing thoughts on just Christians within a political system. What are some things for us to think about? I know that's pretty broad, but wherever the Spirit takes you is what I want to hear. Alex, you've been very gentle and quiet. We'll start with you.
Sorry, restate the question again.
It's all good. We were just talking about like any advice you have for Christians going forward, any thoughts you have about Christians when we talk about elections and politics and that sort of thing. How does a Christian engage with those things? How would you like to see them engage? What changes would you like to see them make? Just anything that you see from Christians that you would like to see from Christians going forward. Any advice from a listener who's a Christian, sees the options, doesn't like the options, and they're thinking about what to do in the future.
Well, one easy way I can look at it from a Christian lens is the Bible mentions turning the other cheek, not turning a blind eye. And a lot of people want to turn a blind eye and excuse things like, I forget how long ago it was, for example, but I'd seen a friend of mine who hasn't been a Christian probably in a decade that I know related to the LP stuff. And they tried really, really hard to make some niche, ridiculous claim about trans kids getting killed in my state in an attempt to seemingly defend Biden trying to deport asylum seekers. And it's like, that person's a Democrat now. But they're so blind that they're willing to say if we don't deport the asylum seekers, then trans people are going to die. And like that's how they're basically interpreting it out of desperation to get someone like Biden reelected. And I don't necessarily think it's the most Christian to sit there and go, we got to make this extreme exaggerated claim that actually hurts people so that when the bad guy loses or the evil person loses or the wrong party loses. And I think Christians got to look at it from like, you can't just turn a blind eye to what's happening and try to justify it by saying the other guy is bad. Like, there were plenty of bad things with Harris that made people accept all the bigoted statements from Trump and all his personal baggage, and even stuff with Harris that made people accept what she was doing that was wrong, in an attempt to like oppose Trump. And I think my real advice for Christians would just be, don't turn a blind eye to every little thing that's being done by a candidate just to say they're the lesser of two evils. Because the lesser of two evils isn't how the Bible sees things, or how God wants us to see things.
Good advice. Niece, what do you got for Christians going forward?
Man, I don't know. They just got to stop with the cultural stuff, right? It's just like, you know, it's. I don't know if it's just like the years, like you know, the old prosperity gospel stuff, right? Where it's just like, you know, I gotta, if I'm not like this, you know, I'm not winning, right? This whole like, if I'm not doing this, I'm not winning sort of behavior. If I'm not with this in group, I'm not winning sort of behavior. Um, if they were less focused on that, they actually take things like objectively, right? Or they took things like at least at face value instead of just being like, well, I got to vote for this because, you know, what's the thing that's like the HRT on kids thing, right? It's like you can say I don't want to, you know, put like HRT into 10-year-old kids without having to like attach it to like religious dogma, right? Or you could say like, oh, I don't agree with abortion, we'll have to attach it to religious dogma and make it a huge political issue, which is what some of the issues were for like this 2024 election cycle. At least for people in like the cultural warrior stance. It's like, I think if you just did less of that and more of like just voting based on normative values that matter to most people, it would be less of an issue. You wouldn't have to be like, well, I kind of gotta vote for like the really cringy racist dude and rapist dude because, you know, I just don't like them ladies, you know, being naked on OnlyFans. And I just don't like them having like consequence-free sex, you know. It just irritates the shit out of me, you know. That's just a really bad optic for politics. It's very bad optics for like human beings as well. Like, you know, it doesn't matter what they do. You know, it's like you're not in control of their life, they're not in control of your life, but you're trying to make yourself control of their life, at least through cultural, like, you know, aspects of it. I think if you're going forward, it's like you just need to divest from the sort of like cultural political integration into like your religion, because America was not founded on that, but you're trying to consistently make that. They've been doing that for like 40, 50, 60 years now. But I don't know how you really divest that. You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of hard. It's so ingrained into American culture, at least on, you know, right-wing politics at this point in time, that it takes something completely, you know, astronomical to even change that sort of mentality.
Yeah, that's solid advice. I definitely agree. Keith, advice for Christians going forward.
So it's a time to love people no matter what their politics is, because it's very easy to hate Trump people. It's very easy to hate Harris people. It's easy to go on the internet and see what someone says and just think that person is awful because they said this thing. And as much as I'm guilty of writing all people as well, I think it's on Christians to realize that not all Trump and Harris supporters are evil, because a lot of them are themselves victims of propaganda. I think that it's a time for Christians to recruit others by consistently showing kindness ourselves, because it's desperately needed. Christianity, I think, is being used falsely as a weapon against people. It's being marketed as something that is opposed to liberty. Like, if you're a Christian, you want to target trans people with the law, or you want to ban pornography with the federal government, or, you know, things like this. And I think it's on us to put love first, to show that Christians don't have to support something in order to think that people should be free from the initiation of force because of it. That we should follow Christ's example and forgive people, and accept people and try to bring them in instead of push them away.
I think that's wonderful advice. So Christians a lot of times will cite the times when Jesus was short with people. The Jesus in the temple square is very is often cited when I say, well, let's make sure we're loving. People are like, well, Jesus was loving when he knocked over those tables. Okay. Look at all the times that Jesus was harsh with people, what we would call harsh.
I'm sorry. My wife likes to point out frequently that the times that Jesus was most critical was to his own people.
That's exactly what I'm going to say. Yeah, this is his own people, right? Like when he says, "Get thou behind me, Satan," he's talking to Peter, right? Like he is not talking to the downtrodden, the weak, the suffering. He's not talking to his opponents. Jesus was kind to the people who sentenced him to death. He healed the person who arrested him. He prayed and asked forgiveness for the people who put the nails through his hands. So even if you think Trump and Harris supporters are the ultimate evil, right? Like they've supported somebody who's just not forgivable or unlovable. Remember how Jesus treated the people who killed him, and treat them better, treat them well. Make a point of it. If you feel the need to be harsh with anybody, look inside. You shouldn't feel the need to be harsh with anybody, but if you have to be harsh with people, look at your own crowd.
Yeah.
Right? As me in the Liberty Movement, you've heard me be very harsh about some of what we did. I'm aware we're not advocating for genocides. The other two sides are. Right? Like I'm fully aware that we are not over, like I believe in liberty, right? Like I like our points. But the reason I give my toughest criticisms for fellow Christians and for the Liberty Movement is because that's the people I demand better of. Those are my representatives, right? That are out there in the world. I don't expect anything of atheists or Muslims. I don't expect anything of Republicans or Democrats, right? Like they are not my circle, but we're all God's circle, right? Like we all need to treat each other better, treat each other well, love each other. Keep it practical. Disengage from politics if you must. The way that Jesus got people to his side was he stopped preaching the scripture, according to Matthew. He just didn't speak in scripture at all. He spoke in parables, languages that they understood. Right? So speak to people in a way they understand, right? Instead of getting all technical. If it doesn't seem like you're getting through to them, instead of trying to, we always do this one-upsman thing where we try to get more and more technical until we won some kind of debate. Nobody changes their minds that way, right? Get less technical. Speak the language they understand. What's the language they most often understand? Well, I've already mentioned 90% of people have had to make a major life change to accommodate what's happened to the economy. People are hurting. We're experiencing unprecedented amounts of loneliness, despite having social media and everything that we have. Unprecedented amounts of poverty. Like, and I don't want to say unprecedented to the world, obviously, like,
right.
You know, but for some people, this is the poorest they've ever got. This is the least affordable college has ever been in their lives. This is the least affordable car or house has ever been. This is the most expensive groceries have ever been. I run a local, or I don't run it. I'm sorry. I work with a local food pantry, and this food pantry went 4 years ago. It was a joke, right? Like this place was cans on cans on cans. It's just a place you donated unlimited cans. I honestly was like, we need to tell people to stop donating. This is never going to go anywhere. And today that line is around the block. I'm in a fairly affluent neighborhood, and there are people who are my neighbors in this line. Right. Wow. Like looking to just get whatever they can, like from this, donated food pantry. And we're begging for more items. Like we're running out, right? Like we're partnering with businesses now to donate more. This is a time when people are hurting. Bring healing to them. If you catch yourself in the middle of a fight about politics, consult the Holy Spirit, do what the Holy Spirit tells you to do. If you can't figure it out, I'm going to give you some advice. Stop immediately. Just say, I don't want to debate about this. Think about what that person's needs are and meet their needs, whatever they may be. I understand it may not seem like it's going to change their mind about politics, but healed people make decisions that are good, and wounded people make decisions that are bad. When an animal's stuck in a trap, We see them thrashing about. They're willing to break their bones, right? Like they're hurting. They're lashing out. They're angry with everything. An animal that's content, feels good, feels satisfied. I mean, a bear will roll over on its belly and let you pet it. You know, like this is, and none of that has to do with changing their nature. A bear is still a bear. All you've done is change the conditions around them. You don't have the power to change everybody's nature. We're all sinners. We're all human beings. We've all fallen short. We all have problems. But we do have the power to change people's environments, change their conditions. Even if not forever, they can change it when they're with you. If they say, I know that person. My point is liberty will win when everybody's best friend is a libertarian. Right now, everybody, like the best person and worst person you know is a libertarian for most people, right? Like there is, you either know Jeremy Kauffman, who says, I mean, my goodness, whatever he said on Tim Pool, that you're consenting to rape if you live in a place that's like higher rape prevalence and you choose not to move, right? Like insane
Nice.
reparations to send black people back to Africa, like absolutely unacceptable human being, human positions to have. I pray for Jeremy's soul as well. But like these are an unacceptable human being to have in the liberty movement, right? Like needs to be changed. Cannot have it. Right. But also you have like Mary Ruwart. You also have Chase Oliver. Right. It's amazing the light versus darkness that we see right now within the liberty movement between like the Rechtenwald and the Chase Oliver. Right. Like it's, and so for me, like Christians, the solution is not to argue more. We've done this. Arguing has gotten us here. We're still here. We need to do work. We need to heal people. We need to heal them where they're at. And that's all we can do. If you need to disengage with politics for a little bit and just meet people where they are, do it. I don't want this. I know this episode's about politics, right? We're talking about current events. But just don't make it about politics. Make politics not about politics. You know, Nice talked about getting out of culture, and I agree with him in the sense that he was talking about. But really, we need to be deeply involved with culture. Music, art, literature, celebrations, customs, lifestyles. We should be encouraging everybody to be as free as they possibly can with these things, to be deeply engaged with their lives. And as soon as we're not, well, the Republicans and Democrats are more than happy to snatch them up. Right? And tell you what that lifestyle should be. Tell you what the right way to live is, what the best way to live is, who the right people are to listen to, who the right experts are, right? As opposed to us, who we say, man, you got to govern your own life. Like Christians just say, man, you've got to govern your own life. We hope you'll choose Christ. And we're willing to make the pitch. But that pitch isn't just like a sales pitch. That pitch is bringing you healing and bringing you goodness. I know it seems too simple, but it really is the answer. I have seen more people come to Christ through my ministry of just, and I call it ministry, but of just like feeding, of just clothing people. When I talked about like the revolution with Chase over here with the homeless, like saw people give their lives to God, than I ever have in all my libertarian broadcasting ever. Nice mentioned this. Nobody listens to us, right? We're so small. Like, nobody outside this world listens to us. People people got their spayed and neutered their animals because Bob Barker said to, right? Like, we don't have a Bob Barker, right? Like, we don't have very much. So think about who you actually do make a difference to. Stop trying to focus on top down. Start focusing on bottom up. Fix your family. Fix your friends. Bring healing to the people who actually trust you. When we talk about even the liberty movement, that's too broad. You're not going to fix all of them. Start with the people who you have an environment with, who you share an environment with. The Martin Luther King Jr.'s and Gandhi's of the world, the people like the Jesus Christ, the Pauls, the people who shaped the world, they didn't do it top down. They recognized the bottom up. How are you first in God's kingdom? By being last. Fight to be last. Fight to serve. Fight to wash feet. Make that your goal. Don't set out saying, I want to speak from the top down and hopefully everybody will listen to me. Wrong way to go about it. Any revolution that's happened that way has been tyrannical. Only good revolutions are bottom up. Focus on that. Focus on who are the least of these right now. They're the people who are most impacted by the results of this election. We're seeing some of the stocks happen right now. We're seeing companies talking about lowering their wages and raising prices already. You know the people who are going to be hurt the most by this. Go to them right now. You know trans people, gay people, immigrant people who are afraid, and rightfully so, of what's going to happen to them for the next 4 years. Go to them right now. Let them know, hey, I'm thinking of you. When I do anything in life, I'm thinking of you. And I don't want to go any place that you can't go. Alex, Nice, Keith, thank you all so much for coming in today. I appreciate you taking the time here. Excellently viewed episode. Everybody who viewed and kept watching and watched until the end, the numbers only grew. And again, I know that means that we've been having a great conversation. We'll be back with the Bible study next Wednesday. We'll be talking Lamentations. Then we're looking to get maybe like a book thing going. If you'd like to be part of that conversation, we're still kind of figuring it out in the chat. If you want to be part of that dialogue, we'd love to have you, Christian or not. We love to have Christ-centric conversations, but even if you're not a Christian, that doesn't mean that it's wrong for you to have those. If what we said is interesting to you, we'd be blessed to have your presence. We have atheists in the Love First Christians already. In the chat, we have atheists, heathens, animists. We welcome people of all walks of life. We'd be blessed to have your perspective as well. But anyhow, have a blessed week, guys. I look forward to talking to y'all next week. There's a link in the description if you want to join the Love First Christians and be a part of our dialogues. And if not, I'll see you whenever I see you. But hopefully we see you sooner rather than later. Have a good night, guys. We'll see y'all later.
Good night.